The second pillar of self-esteem is the practice of self-acceptance. Without self-acceptance, self-esteem is impossible. In fact, it is so intimately bound up with self-esteem that one sometimes sees the two ideas confused. Yet they are different in meaning, and each needs to be understood in its own right. Whereas self-esteem is something we experience, self-acceptance is something we do. To be self-accepting is to be on my own side, to be for myself. In the most fundamental sense, self-acceptance refers to an orientation of self-value and self-commitment that derives from the fact that I am alive and conscious. As such, it is more primitive than self-esteem. It is a pre-rational, pre-moral act of self-affirmation. It is a kind of natural egoism that is the birthright of every human being. Some people are self-rejecting at so deep a level that no growth work can ever begin until and unless this problem is addressed. If it is not, no treatment will hold, no new learning will be properly integrated, no significant advances can be made. An attitude of basic self-acceptance entails the declaration, I choose to value myself, to treat myself with respect, to stand up for my right to exist. This primary act of self-affirmation is the base on which self-esteem develops. It can lie sleeping and then suddenly awake. It can fight for our life even when we are filled with despair. When we are on the brink of suicide, it can make us pick up the telephone and call for help. From the depths of anxiety or depression, it can lead us to the office of a psychotherapist. When all we want to do is lie down and die, it can impel us to keep moving. It is the voice of the life force. It is selfishness in the noblest meaning of that word. If it goes silent, self-esteem is the first casualty. Self-acceptance entails our willingness to experience, without denial or evasion, that we think what we think, feel what we feel, desire what we desire, have done what we have done, and are what we are. It is our willingness to experience rather than to disown whatever may be the facts of our being at a particular moment. The willingness to experience and accept our feelings carries no implication that emotions are to have the last word on what we do. I may not be in the mood to work today. I can acknowledge my feelings, experience them, accept them, and then go to work. I will work with a clearer mind because I have not begun the day with self-deception. Often, when we fully experience and accept negative feelings, we are able to let go of them. They have been allowed to have their say, and they relinquish center stage. Self-acceptance is the willingness to say of any emotion or behavior, this is an expression of me. It is not necessarily an expression I like or admire, but it is an expression of me nonetheless, at least at the time it occurred. If I am thinking these disturbing thoughts, I am thinking them. I accept the full reality of my experience. If I am feeling pain or anger or fear or inconvenient lust, I am feeling it. What is true is true. I do not rationalize, deny, or attempt to explain away. I am feeling what I am feeling, and I accept the reality of my experience. If I have taken actions of which I am later ashamed, the fact remains that I have taken them. I do not twist my brain to make facts disappear. I am willing to stand still in the presence of what I know to be true. What is, is. To accept is more than simply to acknowledge or admit. It is to experience, stand in the presence of, contemplate the reality of, absorb into my consciousness. I need to open myself to and fully experience unwanted emotions, not just perfunctorily recognize them. Accepting does not necessarily mean liking, enjoying, or condoning. I can accept one is and be determined to evolve from there. It is not acceptance but denial that leaves me stuck. I cannot be truly for myself. I cannot build self-esteem if I cannot accept myself. Self-acceptance also entails the idea of compassion, of being a friend to myself. Suppose I have done something that I regret, or of which I am ashamed, and for which I reproach myself. Self-acceptance does not deny reality, does not argue that what is wrong is really all right, but it inquires into the context in which the action was taken. It wants to understand the why. It wants to know why something that is wrong or inappropriate felt desirable, or appropriate, or even necessary at the time. We do not understand another human being when we know only that what he or she did is wrong, unkind, destructive, or whatever. We need to know the internal considerations that prompted the behavior. There is always some context in which the most offensive actions can have their own kind of sense. This does not mean they are justified, only that they can be understandable. I can condemn some action I have taken and still have compassionate interest in the motives that prompted it. I can still be a friend to myself. This has nothing to do with alibying, rationalizing, or avoiding responsibility. A good friend might say to me, "This was unworthy of you. Now tell me, what made it feel like a good idea, or at least a defensible one?" This, too, is what I can say to myself. Just as when we need to reproach or correct others, we should wish to do so in ways that do not damage their self-esteem, so we should bring the same benevolence to ourselves. This is the virtue of self-acceptance. By way of introducing clients to the idea of self-acceptance, I often like to begin with a simple exercise. It can offer a profound learning experience. Stand in front of a full-length mirror and look at your face and body. Notice your feelings as you do so. I'm asking you to focus not on your clothes or your makeup, but on you. Notice if this is difficult or makes you uncomfortable. It is good to do this exercise naked. You will probably like some parts of what you see more than others. If you're like most people, you'll find some parts difficult to look at for long because they agitate or displease you. In your eyes, there may be a pain you do not want to confront. Perhaps you're too fat or too thin. Perhaps you see signs of age and cannot bear to stay connected with the thoughts and emotions these signs evoke. So, the impulse is to escape, to flee from awareness, to reject, deny, disown aspects of yourself. Stay focused on your image in the mirror a few moments longer and say to yourself, "Whatever my defects or imperfections, I accept myself unreservedly and completely." Stay focused, breathe deeply, and say this over and over again for a minute or two without rushing the process. Allow yourself fully to experience the meaning of your words. You may find yourself protesting, "But I don't like certain things about my body, so how could I accept them unreservedly and completely?" But remember, accepting does not necessarily mean liking. Accepting does not mean we cannot imagine or wish for changes or improvements. It means experiencing without denial or avoidance that a fact is a fact. In this case, it means accepting that the face and body in the mirror are your face and body, and they are what they are. Even though you may not like or enjoy everything you see when you look in the mirror, you are still able to say, "Right now, that's me. And I don't deny the fact, I accept it." That is respect for reality. When clients commit to do this exercise for 2 minutes every morning and again every night for 2 weeks, they soon begin to experience the relationship between self-acceptance and self-esteem. That relationship is a mind that honors sight, honors itself. But more than that, how can self-esteem not suffer if we are in a rejecting relationship to our own physical being? Is it realistic to imagine that we can love ourselves while despising what we see in the mirror? Those who do this exercise make another important discovery. Not only do they enter a more harmonious relationship with themselves, but if aspects of the self they do not like are within their power to change, they are more motivated to make the changes, once they have accepted the facts as they are now. We are not moved to change those things whose reality we deny. What about those things we cannot change? Well, when we accept them, we grow stronger and more centered. When we curse and protest them, we disempower ourselves. Suppose our negative reaction to some experience is so overwhelming that we feel we cannot practice self-acceptance with regard to it. Let us say the feeling, thought, or memory is so distressing and agitating that acceptance feels out of the question. We feel powerless not to block and contract. The solution is not to resist our resistance. It is not useful to try to block a block. Instead, we need to do something more artful. If we cannot accept a feeling or a thought or a memory, we should accept our resistance. In other words, start by accepting where we are. Be present to the now and experience it fully. If we stay with resistance at the conscious level, it will usually begin to dissolve. When we fight a block, it grows stronger. When we acknowledge, experience, and accept it, it begins to melt, because its continued existence requires opposition. Sometimes in therapy, when a person has difficulty accepting a feeling, I will ask if he or she is willing to accept the fact of refusing to accept the feeling. I asked this once of a client who was a clergyman and who had great difficulty in owning or experiencing his anger. Just the same, he was a very angry man. My request disoriented him. "Will I accept that I won't accept my anger?" he asked me. When I answered, "That's right," he thundered, "I refuse to accept my anger, and I refuse to accept my refusal." I asked, "Will you accept your refusal to accept your refusal? We've got to begin somewhere. Let's begin there." I asked him to face the group and say, "I'm angry," over and over again. Soon he was saying it very angrily indeed. Then I had him say, "I refuse to accept my anger," which he shouted with escalating vigor. Then I had him say, "I refuse to accept my refusal to accept my anger," which he plunged into ferociously. Then I had him say, "But I am willing to accept my refusal to accept my refusal," and he kept repeating it until he broke down and joined in the laughter of the group. "So if you can't accept the experience, accept the resistance," he said. I answered, "Right. And if you can't accept the resistance, accept your resistance to accepting the resistance. Eventually, you'll arrive at the point you can accept. Then you can move forward from there." Both accepting and disowning are implemented through a combination of mental and physical processes. The act of experiencing and accepting our emotions is implemented through, first, focusing on the feeling or emotion, then breathing gently and deeply, allowing muscles to relax, allowing the feeling to be felt, and finally, making real that this is my feeling. This is what we call owning it. In contrast, we deny and disown our emotions through, first, avoiding awareness of their reality, then constricting our breathing and tightening our muscles to cut off or numb the feeling, and finally, disassociating ourselves from our own experience. We typically encounter two fallacious assumptions when people have difficulty with the idea of self-acceptance. One is the belief that if we accept who and what we are, we must approve of everything about us. The other is the belief that if we accept who and what we are indifferent to change or improvement. But of course the question is, if we cannot accept what is, where will we find the motivation to improve? If we deny and disown what is, how will we be inspired to grow? There is a paradox here. Acceptance of what is the precondition of change, and denial of what is leaves me stuck in it. Let's try some sentence completion exercises designed to facilitate self-acceptance. Each morning, write 6 to 10 endings for the following sentence stems as rapidly as possible. Again, do not worry if your endings are literally true, make sense, or are profound. Self-acceptance to me means, if I am more accepting of my body, when I deny and disown my body, If I am more accepting of my conflicts, that's all. When you're finished, proceed with your day's business. In the evening, do 6 to 10 endings each for the following stems. When I deny or disown my conflicts, if I am more accepting of my feelings, when I deny and disown my feelings, if I am more accepting of my thoughts, when I deny and disown my thoughts. Do this exercise every day, Monday through Friday. On the weekend, read over what you have written and then write 6 to 10 endings for this stem. If any of what I have been writing this week is true, it might be helpful if anything we have the possibility of experiencing, we have the possibility of disowning, either immediately or later, in memory. Nietzsche wrote, "I did it," says memory. "I couldn't have," says pride, and remains relentless. Eventually, memory yields. Unquote. I can rebel against my memories, thoughts, emotions, actions. I can reject rather than accept virtually any aspect of my experience. I can refuse to accept my sensuality. I can refuse to accept my spirituality. I can disown my sorrow. I can disown my joy. I can repress the memory of actions of which I am ashamed. I can repress the memory of actions of which I am proud. I can deny my ignorance. I can deny my intelligence. I can refuse to accept my limitations. I can refuse to accept my potentials. I can conceal my weaknesses. I can conceal my strengths. I can deny my feelings of self-hatred. I can deny my feelings of self-love. I can pretend that I am more than I am. I can pretend that I am less than I am. I can disown my body. I can disown my mind. We can be as frightened of our assets as we are of our shortcomings, as frightened of our genius, ambition, excitement, or beauty as we are of our emptiness, passivity, depression, or unattractiveness. If our liabilities pose the problem of inadequacy, our assets pose the challenge of responsibility. The greatest crime we commit against ourselves is not that we may deny and disown our shortcomings, but that we deny and disown our greatness because it frightens us. If a fully realized self-acceptance does not evade the worst within us, neither does it evade the best.